Hello everyone, welcome to lecture 7.1 of Python module, and in this video we will be talking about list. So how to create it, how to access elements from list, slicing, different methods available to us, and how to check whether an element exists inside list or not. So let's begin. So lists are used to store multiple data at once. Suppose we need to record age of 5 students. Instead of creating 5 separate variables, we can simply create a list. We create a list by placing elements inside square bracket separated by commas. So a list can store elements of different type like integer, float, string, etc. And it also allows us to store duplicate element. So let's see an example. Here we have created a list and named it as age, and it has numbers, integer values inside it. So how I know this is a list? By square brackets, and each item inside it is separated using commas. So when I'm printing my list, I will get this as an output. You can also see that list allows us to have different data type like integer, string, and float. You can also have duplicate elements like hello in list 2. And you can also declare empty list by this statement. So you just need to give the name to a list and write square brackets in front of it with no element. That signifies that this is an empty list. So I have printed all these lists together using a print statement. Now let's see how to access a list element. Lists are ordered and each item in a list is associated with the number. The number is known as a list index. The index of a first element is 0, second element is 1, and so on. So first thing to remember is that indexing starts from 0. And Python also allows us for negative indexing. So -1 refers to the last element, -2 refers to the second last element, and so on, as shown us in the diagram. So let's see an example of these as well. So here I have created a list which contains string data type of languages like Python, Java, and C++. Now I want to access one item from this list. I can do that using indexing. And how to use indexing? Using square brackets, and inside that I will be putting index value. So Python index value is 0 as this is the first element in language. Java is 1 and C++ is 2. So when I will be accessing 0th index, it will give me Python, and when I will access second index, it will give me C++, as shown in the output. Now let's see an example of negative indexing. So we have the same list as above, and this time I'm trying to access an element language -1. Since -1 represents the last element of a list, it will print C++. Now I'm trying to access -4th index. Starting from a negative indexing, this is -1, this is -2, and this is -3. So -4 does not exist. Therefore, this will give me an index error exception. So let's run this program. You can see that -1 gives me C++, though -4 gives me an index error. Now let's see how to do slicing of a list. Indexing allows us to access one element at a time, but through slicing it's possible to access a portion of a list, and that we can do using a slicing operator : So again we will be using square brackets, but this time instead of writing one value, we will be writing two values, and they are separated using colons. At left of colon we will be mentioning the starting index, and right of colon we will be mentioning the end index. Start index is inclusive and end index is exclusive. Therefore, when I am writing 2:5, this will give me an item from index 2 to 4. Similarly, when I am writing nothing at the right of colon, that means that I am trying to access elements starting from 3 till the end. And when I am not mentioning both the start index and end index, it will by default take the entire list. So it starts from beginning to the end. So let's print this code. So O is the second index value and R is the fourth index value. Similarly, 3:nothing gives from third index till the end. And when I'm not mentioning the start and end index, it's taking the entire list. So the note which you need to keep in mind is that start index is inclusive while end index is exclusive. Now let's see how to add elements to a list. Lists are mutable, that means we can change them. We can add and remove elements from a list, and Python lists provide different methods to add items to a list. Now let's see some of them. So one, we have append. So append method adds an item at the end of the list. So for example, we have created a list number which has certain items as integers. Now I want to append an item 32. So append method will add 32 at the end of the numbers. So let's print this. So this is my original list and 32 is attached at the end of the list. Similarly, I have an extend method. So this allows to add all the item of an iterable to the end of the list. So one thing to notice here is that extend also add at the end, but it add iterable list. So iterable can be a list, tuple, dictionary, set, but it need to be iterable. You cannot use one element in it. So here is my original list, and I want to extend this list with another list that is an even numbers list. So when I am extending numbers with even number and then printing it, let's see an output. So this is what I'm getting. So 135 was my original list and it is extended to 4, 6 and 8. So for example, instead of an iterable item, here I'm just putting an item and then trying to extend my original list. This will give me an error that int object is not iterable. So to use the method extend, it's important to use an iterable item. Now let's see insert method. So it insert an element at a specific index. So first you need to mention an index and then the value which you want to insert. So here is a list of numbers and I want to insert 20 at index 1. Let's print a number. So it will give me 10, 20, 30 and 40 as an output. Now let's see how to change items inside a list. As talked earlier, that Python lists are mutable. That means we can change them. Therefore, we can change item of a list by assigning new values using a equals to operator. For example, here we have a list languages which has certain string data type. Now I want to change second index from C++ to C. And let's print the updated list. So as you can see that here instead of C++, C is getting printed. So I have changed my second index value. So till now we have seen how to add an item, how to update an item. Now let's see how to remove an item from a list. So for that we have a keyword del. So to remove a portion of a list or a particular value at a particular index, we can use a keyword del. So for example, I am deleting the first index from a language list. Therefore, JavaScript should not be present. So let's print this updated list and this is the output I am getting. Here you can see that JavaScript is not present. Now in this updated list, I want to remove the last item using the negative indexing. So as you can see, when I'm printing this language list, I'm not getting R as its last element. So again, the delete function is working properly. Keyword is working properly. Now I want to remove from this updated list a portion starting from 0 till 2. Since 0 is inclusive and 2 is exclusive, it will remove the 0th index value and first index value. So C++ and Python will be removed from a list, and when I'm printing, you can see that Python and C++ is not present. Now we have different methods to remove values in a list like remove. So simply you need to write languages.remove and a particular value which you want to remove. So when you will be printing this list, you can see that Python is removed. So you use this remove method when you know what item to be removed. And you can also use a pop method when you don't know the item name, but then the index which you want to remove. So here inside pop, you will be passing index, and in remove, you will be passing an element which you want to remove. So that's the difference. And also remove does not return you anything, but pop returns the pop element which you have popped. So as you can see, when I'm popping the 0th element, that is Python, and then I'm printing this, it is returning me the item which will be popped. And then when I'm printing the updated list, Python is not present inside it. So again, let's understand the difference between remove and pop. In remove, you will be passing an item which you want to remove, and it does not return you anything. While in case of pop, you will be passing the index where you want to remove an item, and it will return you the value which is popped. Okay, we also have a method clear which clears the entire list. So for example, here I have a list of various languages, and when I'm clearing it and then printing this language, you will see that we have an empty list as an output. So these are the common methods which we will be using to add, update and delete list. We have more methods inside list to make our task easier. Let's see some of an example. So we have index, which actually returns the index of the first matched item. So for example, I have a list language which has certain string values and repeated values as well. So if I want to see the index of Python using an index method, it will return me the first index or the first occurrence of Python. So Python is at 0 and 3, but it will return me only 0 because it returns the index of a first matched item. We also have a count method which returns the count of a specified item in a list. So for example, here I have Python 3 times or 4 times, and I want to check how many times Python occurred in my list. So I will be using the count method, and inside its parenthesis, I will be passing the values whose count I want to know. So it will return me 4. And then we have a sort method which is used multiple times to sort a list in ascending or descending order. So for example, here I have a list of prime numbers and I want to sort them in ascending order. So sort by default sorts a list into the ascending order. So when I will be printing my prime number, it gives me 2, 3, 5, 7 and 11. Therefore, when I want to sort a list in descending order, I need to explicitly write that reverse is equals to true. Therefore, you need to sort this list in a descending order. So when I'm printing my even numbers, it starts from the greatest number and then to the smallest number. We also have a reverse method which reverses the item of the list or their occurrences. So for example, I have a list 2, 3, 5 and 7. But when I reverse this list using a reverse method, I will have 7, 5, 3 and 2 as the output. I also have a copy method which exactly copy or return the shallow copy of a list. So this is my original list. But when I do copy, it returns me the copy. So few things to notice when we are talking about method. What method is doing what? So the basic task of method, what it is accepting inside its parenthesis, and is it returning me something or is it only performing an action? Now let's talk about some more basic things which you should know about a list. How to iterate over a list. So for iterating over a sequence, you already know we use a for loop. So here I have a list of languages. So I will be doing for loop. So language is my variable of a for loop which iterate over every element of a languages list and print each item inside it. So it gives me Python, Java, C++ individually. Why in separate lines? Because print has by default /n as its end value. So it starts from a new line every time it is called. Now let's see how to check whether an element exists in a list or not. So for that we use a membership operator which is in. So when I'm writing that C is in languages, it checks whether this element exists inside language list or not. Similarly, I can also check whether Python is present in language or not, and it returns a Boolean value, true or false. Since C is not inside language, it returns false, and Python is present in language, it returns me true. You can also calculate a length of a list without running a for loop using a length method. So here is a list and I want to print a list and also its length. So length can be used to calculate the length of a list, Also, you can comprehend your list. That means that you have an empty list numbers and then you are iterating over a range 1 to 6, and every time you are appending n raised to the power 2 inside your number list. So instead of writing this entire logic, you can comprehend it using this one sentence. So number is a list. Why? Because we are using square brackets, and then you are appending n raised to the power 2. So what is n? So it is basically a variable of a for loop which takes a value inside range. So when I'm running this code, it will return me 1 since value of n is 1 first. So 1 raised to the power 2 is 1. Now the value of n is 2. So 2 raised to the power 2 is 4. Now the value of n is 3. So 3 raised to the power 2 is 9. Now the value of n is 4. So 4 raised to the power 2 is 16. Now the value of n is 5. And 5 raised to the power 2 is 25. And when the value of n is 6, it gets out of range since 1 is inclusive and 6 is exclusive. So it only iterates for the values 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So when n is equals to 6, my for loop gets terminated, and these are the values which are appended inside the numbers list. So let's revise what all we learned in the list. So to create a list, we use square brackets and every item is separated using commas. So we can have different type of data inside a list and also duplicate elements. You can declare empty list using this, and you can also access item using indexing. You can either use 0 indexing or negative indexing. So 0 represents the first element and -1 represents the last element. Now we saw that when we are accessing an index which is not present, it throws an index error. You can also do slicing inside a list to access a portion of it, and you use a colon symbol for it. So start index is inclusive and end index is exclusive, and if you do not mention them, it takes beginning as a default and end as a default for the end index. Then we saw how to add an element to a list. You can use append, where you will be passing a value which you want to append at the end. But if you want to extend a list to more lists, you can use an iterable, and then you can use an extend method. You can also use an insert method if you want to insert a value at a particular index. Now we saw how to change an item in list. It's possible because lists are mutable, you can change them. So you use equals to sign to change the values of a list. We can remove an item from a list either using a del keyword, where you can either remove a element using indexing, or you can remove a portion using slicing. Then we have a remove method where you pass the value which you want to remove. You have a pop method where you write the index which you want to remove, and it also returns the value which it popped. You also have a clear method which clears out all the list. Then we have certain more famous list method like index, which returns the first match item. We have count, which returns the count of a specified item. We have sort method, which sorts the list in ascending or descending order. So by default, it sorts in ascending order. So to make it in descending order, you need to pass reverse is equals to true. You can use reverse method to reverse the occurrence of elements inside a list, and you can also use copy method to copy a list, and copy returns you the value. You can iterate over a list using a for loop. You can check if an element exists in a list using a membership operator. You can check the length of a list using a length method, and you can also do list comprehension. So this is the example which I showed.